My favorite was a guy actually yelled at me once because I told him I liked Herschel Gordon Lewis, and he said, "Oh, you've probably just seen like Blood Feast, and now you think you're a fan."
I'm here with Amanda Reyes, who has contributed to countless releases, some of which are very recent. We're going to be talking about in a few minutes, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4K and the brand new site exclusive from Scream Factory, Sorority House Massacre. Amanda, thanks for doing this.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, speaking of excited, I'm excited because you're the first one since the Shelf Shock Rewind Awards that I can say congratulations for winning for your contribution for this.
Thank you so much. That was really unexpected and really exciting. I've never won an award for my work. And that one was a lot of fun to do. I did that with Chris O'Neill. He did the visuals. He's really good at that. And I wrote a little essay on Linda Manns, and it was great to pay tribute to her. She's a fantastic actress, and it's such a good movie. And I'm really glad that people liked it. And thank you so much.
I'm very fortunate, I feel like, because I got to see Out of the Blue on the big screen about 2 weeks ago here in Kansas City, and mind-blowing experience. Like it's great at home. The restoration is incredible. Obviously, the disc is wonderful, but seeing it in a crowded room, it wasn't a huge theater. I think we sat probably 35, but it was like it was like 30 people in there. There was only a couple seats empty, but seeing it with people that had seen it before and that were fans of it, or you could tell there was a couple that were newbies, especially by the end. They're like, "Oh, geez." Can you share why Out of the Blue is so special for you, or what Linda Manns meant to you?
Out of the Blue was a movie I saw as a teenager when I was sort of discovering film for the first time and discovering Dennis Hopper. I didn't know anything about the backstory until really they asked me to do this essay on Linda Manns. But I've always liked Linda Manns because she was so different. She was really strikingly beautiful in her own way, and she kind of took her own path. And she was her own person, and I think a lot of young women really liked her. She was kind of a Christy McNichol type, like she didn't have to be like super girly, and she was very independent, and she was really strong-willed, or she came across that way in her films.
Right.
And I think as a young girl, that was really impressive to me, like this idea that you don't have to be what society tells you have to be. And also, the first time I saw that movie, I was not expecting it to go where it went, and it just was literally burned into my brain, the ending, and it was just a tremendous film. And so when they approached me, I have to be honest, I didn't know all that much about Linda Manns as a person. I just knew her as an actress, and she was the person that you see in that film. And there's some really interesting stuff in there because Dennis Hopper was like, coked out of his head or whatever. And there's a lot of improvisation in there. Yeah. And there's this really great moment towards the end when he has no idea what his line is. And he says, "Go get and she goes, "pajamas." And he says something like, "How did you know what I was going to say?" And she's like, "'Cause I'm smart." And that's just, they just made that up. And it's so natural and beautiful in the film. And it's just a really wild, fun film.
I had the pleasure of taking my wife to that, and she had never seen it. And listening to the organic reactions during the second half of that was one of the best experiences that I've had with her watching a movie. And she came away, normally she really likes a lot of the stuff that I'm introducing her to, but for about 30 minutes, she was just like, "I just want to keep talking about this movie." And I was like, "Finally, you get it. You get why I love all this. This is amazing," right? So it was a really nice experience.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's a really great film.
It truly is, and Hopper has been getting a lot of love lately, thankfully. So I'm glad that people are kind of coming around on discovering some of his stuff past some of the big titles.
Yeah, and it was really great because when BFI originally commissioned the essay, and then it went to Severin.
Yeah.
But BFI, when they actually approached Chris O'Neill about it, and they were very specific that they had done a lot of stuff for Dennis Hopper, and they felt like Linda Manns needed something of her own. And I really appreciate that he's this amazing filmmaker, but they were looking at everybody in the film and who deserved like some acknowledgement and stuff. And so it's a beautiful, like both releases were great.
They truly are. And again, shout out to that restoration because it looks incredible for what it is. And for a film that was mostly forgotten for a long time, it thankfully has gotten a pretty good send up with this pair of releases.
Yeah, it's been great.
And again, I guess I should shout out to Chris O'Neill, who, you mentioned him. He is on this visual essay with you, also on the Shelf Shock Rewind for that contribution. And it's truly a wonderful addition to that disc. And again, just so glad that you treated that award like it meant something, because we were really trying to give it some actual honor.
It did really mean something. I'm not treating it like that to do that. I mean, it was really, I was very moved, and thank you.
Good. So Amanda is here primarily because she is a contributor to all kinds of physical media releases. And one of the main things that you are known for, including, your handle on Twitter and the book that you've written and everything else that's been a big part of your life for God knows how many years. We're going to get some of that information right now. But these made-for-TV movies, can you share where the love for those came from?
Yeah, from just growing up in the 70s and being around movies that were permissible because my parents were like, oh, it's made for TV, so that should be okay. Yep. Go ahead and watch Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Go ahead. Do it. Let's watch Trilogy of Terror. It's coming on in the afternoon movie. That'll be okay. And so horror was really what impressed me the most when I was a kid, because I was allowed to watch it, and because a lot of it was traumatizing and earth-shattering and like nothing I'd ever seen. And honestly, some of it you can't really repeat. Like that experience with Don't Be Afraid of the Dark is like 5 or 6 years old. It can never be repeated, That was amazing. But when I got older, I'd sort of they were always around and I watched them. And of course I loved Lifetime in my 20s and stuff. And it was fun, but it wasn't really until, so my parents passed away in 2005, back to back. And it was a pretty upsetting, obviously, experience. And I wanted to really just go back to things that reminded me of my childhood. And TV movies kind of came up, and I thought, well, why don't I do a blog about them? And then I can just rewatch all of these great movies and find some new ones. And it kind of grew from there. I think I'm answering your question. And then and actually before I started the blog, a friend of mine named Ryan Orvis had a fanzine called Debaser, and he asked me to write an article about TV movies. So that's probably where the seeds were planted. And I wrote my 10 favorite TV movies or whatever. And then it just kind of slowly went from there. And then Head Press was actually who published my book, Are You in the House Alone? A TV Movie Compendium, 1964 to 1999. And I should have brought a copy to show here, but I don't have one on me. And
I'm going to ask you a question about that in just a second.
Okay.
So I'll get to it, I promise.
Okay. They were actually writing a book on TV movies, and a couple people recommended me because of my blog. And so they approached me, and I was to be just a contributor. They had a lot of really neat people involved. And eventually Head Press, the publisher, David Karakes, was like, I'm having a really hard time getting this going. Do you think you could take over for me? And then I was sort of allowed to make the book that I always dreamed of having myself. And everybody was really wonderful. And so that's kind of where I got to be where I am today, if that answers your question.
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, that's so great. That's 4 questions all wrapped up. I love that. The one I was going to ask that I was alluding to is normally, I showed this because normally I have a stack of things that I want to share to promote for the guest. I don't have a copy of the book, and shame on me. I normally do, but I had to ask because I want the definitive edition. Right now, it's still available in hardback from Fab Press in the UK. Is that the only way to get that great edition?
Yeah, it's Head Press, actually, not Fab.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. As far as I know, it's only available in hardcover through the UK.
Gosh, all right.
It's the same book, though. I mean, whichever one you pick up. It's all this. It's not like there's anything different in it. So I would just get the paperback.
Maybe.
Or the Kindle. It's available in all. I've never actually looked at the Kindle version of it. Somebody actually asked me a question about what the differences were in the layout, and I was like, I don't know. And nobody's ever said anything about it. And I actually never thought about it. But it's, as far as I know, the exact same book in all the versions that are available.
I'm glad that you got the creative freedom after you asked to assist, and that, I mean, to be able to look at that as such kind of the singular experience, because just speaking for a couple generations here, TV movies seem to be going away from a lot of people, and the understanding of what they even are, it's hard to convey how much Netflix is not going to give us a TV movie ever, really. There's a couple things that are going to feel the same, some of the cheesy holiday movies, but it's not quite the same. Is there anything contemporary that you feel really compares to what we were getting back then in the 70s and 80s?
You know, I don't watch that much new stuff, so it's hard for me to answer that question. But I will say I haven't seen past the first season, but I think, well, okay. So essentially, TV movies are definitely, you know, movies made for television, and they're very specific, and they have a specific demographic, and they have all this and that to them. But really, at their core, TV movies are about building community, just like all of television was. Because back in the 70s and 80s, we only had 3-4 channels, right? If you count PBS and your local channel, maybe 5. And so everybody was watching MASH on Monday nights, you know, because millions and millions of people. And so you go to work the next day, and you're like, oh my God, did you see what Hawkeye did or whatever, you know?
Right.
And we still do get that with some shows. I would say Stranger Things has been the one that I've seen that's been the biggest phenomenon. So even though it doesn't feel like anything you would have seen on TV in the 70s or 80s, I think it gets to the heart of community and bringing people together to talk about things and getting them excited and really into, it's almost like what I remembered when the X-Files first hit big.
Yes.
You know, like it didn't start big. And I remember watching it from the very first episode, but once it kicked in, it was like this, I'd never seen anything like that. And Stranger Things had that kind of passion behind it. And so I would say anything like that, where just anybody, where you can come together with different people and get excited about what you're watching. The Walking Dead. So these are TV series, some kind of veering off that, but anything like that gets people super passionate about something and brings them together to talk about these things and share, you know, things that they like and dislike, and characters they love, and kind of sharing the heartbreak when they're not there anymore. Like with Walking Dead, I know there's a lot of that. Yeah. So I think that's really important. It's a great way to like sort of have a collective catharsis in a lot of ways. And I think that's what TV's there for.
I really enjoy your use of that word catharsis there. That is a really nice way to put that. And I mean, all of that kind of leads into one of the things that I was hoping to allude to, but I mean, you're kind of already there, is that currently in the last 10 or 15 years, and we're seeing it in movies and TV, I guess, but we're seeing this glut of nostalgia-based filmmaking, essentially. And that, to me, kind of, it's captured that feeling of the TV movies from the 70s and 80s. Things like, the stuff Toby Hooper worked on, and things that, the Stranger Things season 1 felt like that. It was almost a little dangerous to watch it. It was just that just towing up to the line, but it's cool because it's a TV movie type feeling. Right. So yeah, I'm glad you're going there.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, so just to get back to Walking Dead. So I don't really watch Walking Dead, but I went to a TV conference in the UK in, 2017 or 2018. And I did a presentation on TV movies, but there were 2 people there who had never met, and they each were doing papers on Walking Dead and about the way people share grief together. And they didn't even know that the other person existed and was doing the same studies.
Wow.
And it's kind of amazing how that show has brought people together and helped them work through things. Because sometimes we're asked, this is going to a totally different subject, but sometimes we're asked to like repress our emotions and things. Yeah. And sometimes the only way we can get it out is through television or music or film. And Walking Dead, I think, has helped a lot of people deal with things that they weren't allowed to openly deal with. Because for some reason, it's okay to deal with the death of a character on a TV show, but you can't deal with the death of a relative. They expect you to just move on, right? And so,
yeah.
So I'm getting away from the nostalgia question, but I think this kind of sense of heightened emotion in, like you would see in the TV movie, we would call it melodrama. We're just seeing a different version of it now.
Yeah.
More nuanced, maybe, with more money behind it to do that. That helps. But we're sort of seeing the same thing happening, just in a different way.
And you could honestly argue that for most of pop culture right now. And tying it to the whole nostalgia thing, the people that were nostalgic about these TV movies from the 70s and 80s, a lot of those people are creators now. So they're able to build these emotional followings, and we're getting things, conventions are more popular than ever. People going to just a Stranger Things convention when that's the only thing they're there for. It's hundreds of nerdy people loving the same thing, and nerdy doesn't mean the same thing as it did even 10 years ago. It is something to embrace and be happy about.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And you're right, because I was going to horror conventions in the 90s, and when there were no really other women going at all, except me and a couple of women that were like really into it, and then a couple women that were like girlfriends, and some actresses, in LA.
The brave
And
ones.
yeah, and it's grown so much just from like the Fangoria conventions I used to go to in the 90s. Seems so much smaller than just all the conventions. I go to Texas Frightmare here every year, and it's huge. And it's also a lot more women and stuff too, which is really nice. It's just grown in a lot of different ways where it's I don't know. I think women have always been into horror. We could have that conversation.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But it's, for some reason, it's opened up. I think younger people are more, what's the word I want to say? Secure and like, I'm into this and I'm going to go
100%.
and do this. Yeah. Whereas like when I was growing up, I so many times I would tell people I was into horror movies. It was always men, no offense, but they were always like, that's trash, right? Or my favorite was a guy actually yelled at me once because I told him I liked Herschel Gordon Lewis, and he said, "Oh, you've probably just seen like Blood Feast and now you think you're a fan." And I didn't even know how to respond to that, and now it's not like that at all. Like, I think that there's a real openness to accepting a lot of different kinds of people.
Well, even if you had, that's totally valid. That can be somebody's experience where they see one of the movies and go, dang, I love this. I'm going to grab onto it. There's nothing wrong with that. And
yeah.
I think for years, the horror community somehow had a reputation of being very welcoming. And honestly, it's always been pretty gatekeepy. There's a lot of stuff at the heart of it that will fully shun somebody if they are a fan of the wrong slasher, if their favorite franchise is not the same as theirs. And it's baffling how much we've shunned people away from what could have been an incredible welcoming community for decades.
Yeah. By the way, whatever your favorite slasher is, it's the right slasher.
Exactly.
It is, as long as it's a slasher.
We'll get more into slashers because I'm dying to hear your take on Sorority House Massacre, which I don't have in hand yet. That's another one I wanted to have already, but it's still on the way.
It's a good release.
I can't wait to see it. All the screen caps look fantastic compared to that old blue. I really want to dive in, if you're okay with it, that emotional vulnerability and just seeing how you've seen I feel like I just said the scene 14 times, but seeing how you've seen the scene grow since, the 80s and 90s, because again, these people that were shunning others from the community are now being forced to be a little more welcoming because the younger generations are not, they're intolerant for intolerance. And it's created such a loving, super welcoming environment for all of these new younger fans. And I'm just grateful that I'm alive to witness that right now.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And I'll tell you, like, younger fans are really interesting. So when I went back to school as an adult, and I went to a 4-year college that was an all-girls school, and I was one of the oldest people there. And there were some really interesting young women one of them I still keep in touch with, who they were like into everything, like all the old and new. Like we have this idea that like millennials and everything are like, oh, I just want what's coming out now and all this old stuff sucks. No, not true. And I actually gave a paper presentation in school on this movie called Crawl Space, which is a 1972 TV movie that I love. And this girl, 20 years old, comes up to me and she said, "I love that movie. My parents showed it to me and I'm so glad you gave a paper on it." And I was blown away because it's this pretty rare film. And she loved it. And we had a conversation about it, and it was really cool. And I really like the young people that are getting into all this stuff because they have so much. The thing about horror is that there's so many different things to get into. If you're not into slashers, right, maybe you're into Hammer, maybe you're into monsters, or thrillers or Silence of the Lambs type films or whatever. And so there's something for everybody. But like young people have like all these decades now of stuff to just like consume. And a lot of them are very open to like going back and like, Psycho's the shit, I'm not going to, it's truly a great film. And instead of being like, oh no, it has to be made like within the last 5 years for me to like it. You know what I mean? Yeah, they're really open and it's great.
I feel like 8 to 15 years ago, a lot of people were mostly stuck in the here and now, but just naturally, this up and coming generation seems to be just digging for the roots more. They're more apt to find out the inspiration behind their inspirations, which isn't entirely common, actually.
I'll tell you where I think I don't know how to answer this question, but like I want to say a couple things. So I think physical media has helped with that because they do have all these things that kind of give context and information about these films. But also I think we live in a time when we feel like we have everything at our fingertips, you know, and yet TV movies are really like one of the last frontiers of like lost film. Yeah. And so I think that's where a lot of excitement for the TV movie comes from, because people of all ages are like, oh, that sounds really good. Why can't I find that? What happened? And so people who are into watching everything, like TV movies have become like a big like golden chalice for them, like certain titles and stuff. And I think that that's really helped the world of the TV movie as well.
It's a good point for sure. And I can't wait. I was planning on asking some of your, you know, they may be missing or they may be stuck in right cells, some of the ones that you're dying to see on disc. But we can come back to that for sure if you got something else you want to say.
No, I guess I'm trying to just like, I don't know. I'm agreeing with you, but then all these ideas are coming in my head of like, you know, like how it ties into your show, like the physical media aspect of it. I think that's really helped inspire people to like want to see more, because it's great. I like streaming. I don't have a problem with it.
Of course.
You know, and there's a lot of really great stuff on streaming that's not available, and vice versa. But there's something about getting something that has like all these neat extras on it, like interviews with the actors, a good commentary, liner notes. Sometimes they'll republish old articles or something like that, you know, about the film. And it's really cool to have like not just the movie, but like so much around the film. Right. To help you sort of flesh out these things about the movie, and it enhances your viewing of it.
And the enhancing of the viewing is something that we've talked about on here thousands of times. But because I'm just going to be completely misogynistic here, because I am a very white man, I don't have all of the experiences of all these people around me, and I'm so grateful to have people like you to broaden those horizons with something like Out of the Blue, or even one that I am super excited to hear, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that you recently got to do in the house. I mean, how freaking cool is that?
Yeah, I feel like that was Bill's idea. And then he just called and they were like, sure. And it was like nothing to get in the house. And we were kind of surprised. And and it was really exciting. And we've both been to the house before, but literally the lady that let us in just left. She's like, here, she opened the door, set us up, and then said, you know, just call me when you're done. And we were like, okay. And we were there quite some time. It took a while for us to get that together. But it was really magical. And they have this like doll of Grandpa, and he was sitting across from us while we were recording at like the little bar there. And it was really fun and a little creepy, and pretty neat to sort of be there where all of the magic took place. Yeah, it was really exciting.
While discussing that, I imagine there had to be some moments where you're in your feelings for sure.
Oh yeah, it was just like we were in awe to be there and just to be on the property, and then to be watching the film while you're like talking about it in the house that they shot it in. And I don't know if you've ever been in the house, but it's kind of small. So it's like, it's really interesting because it doesn't look giant in the movie, but it definitely looks bigger. And so it's always kind of like a mind fuck when you're in there, because you're like, oh, I still recognize this, but it's a little different. And the first time I went, the restaurant was open, and they love people to come in. They don't, even when people are sitting there very quietly eating. And I wanted to see the part where, you know, where the middle door opens. That's like the kitchen. And the first time I went in, I was like, where's the part where Leatherface comes out? And they just pointed me to the back, and the door, of course, the metal door is not there, but I was like, this is the best moment of my life.
That's amazing. I can't wait to hear that commentary. And I'm so glad in the span of like 5 weeks, I've had you and Bill both share your experiences about doing that commentary.
Yeah. Well, it was Bill's magic, as it almost always is. I worked with Bill on a few things now, and he's really great at he's so creative, and he's like, I like to deep dive, but Bill likes to deep dive past the deep dive. And sometimes he's hard to keep up with. His ideas just come like this, and it's amazing.
Bill's like a walking archive. It's so crazy how much he just has stored in his brain.
Yeah, I know. And he's always thinking about things like, we're both early birds, and sometimes I'll be getting ready to go to the gym like at 5 a.m, and he'll have sent me like 3 texts about whatever we're doing the commentary on. Well, I've been thinking about this. And I'm like, Bill, go to sleep. You know what I mean? And he's
It's
like, well,
breakfast time.
He's like, no. I'm just curious, And so his brain is always like kind of, the wheels are always turning with him, and it's intimidating, because I never feel like I can keep up, but also I feel like he brings out the best in whoever he works with, because he just keeps you going with them.
Yeah, and you can even tell he's like that while listening to his podcast, because the people that he speaks to, he just pulls that, he's naturally pulling information out of them that even if they didn't want to, he's gonna get it out of them basically.
Yeah, he's so easy to talk to. And when I did my supporting characters, my book hadn't come out yet. It was just on the cusp, and I'd never done anything like that before. And he just started talking to me, and then like 20 minutes in, he said, "Okay, well, here's my first question." And it was just like a progression of the conversation we were already having,
right.
and it was great. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's a magnet. I love Bill. He's incredible.
He's the best.
That also leads to the next one. Sorority House Massacre is this big one on everybody's tongues right now because it just got announced, I believe, last week.
Yeah.
And people are already getting it in hand. What do you love about Sorority House Massacre?
Maybe the easier question is, what don't I love about Sorority House Massacre? It's one of my favorite films, and this was a dream project for me, and it kind of came out of the blue. Daniel Griffith from Ballyhoo put it together, and I didn't realize that he was just interviewing me for an extra. I thought he was going to talk to a few different people and put like something together,
right.
Like a little documentary or something, and I'm trying to remember what he asked, even because these things are so nerve-wracking. I don't even remember what I said. But there's a lot of things about Sorority House Massacre that encompass what I love about slashers. But the primary thing you talk about, and I didn't think it was misogynistic at all to say I'm a white male and this is my experience. Actually, that's great. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people won't say that.
Of course.
I have run in, not as much as some people, but I run into a little bit of like, why is she talking about feminism?
Genuine misogyny.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm a woman, and
right.
But Sorority House Massacre, of course, it was made by a woman, and I think you can tell because there's such an emphasis on the women in the film and developing them as real people and characters you really care about, and also putting you in the middle of what I think is a really warm friendship between the main girl and the character's name, I think, is Linda the Blonde, who's the psychology major. And so when I was preparing for that interview, I watched Sorority House Massacre 3 times in 1 week, just to make sure I memorized it. And the third time I was watching it, I remember sitting down and I was like, oh, I'm so excited I get to watch this again. Like it never bores me. I never not want to watch it. And the more I saw it, the more I kind of loved it. I think for its budget, especially, it's very visually striking, and it's just a really good little film. And I like little movies more than just about anything in the world. And it's like the little slasher that could. And everybody's like, oh, Summer Party Massacre, and that's a great film too. But I think sometimes it gets lumped into that and then compared, and I don't want to compare the two. They're 2 different films, and I think this release will let it stand on its own, which it deserves. And I'm super excited about it. But mostly I talked about, I think, the female friendship and a little bit about Carol Frank and what I think she injected into the film as a woman making a horror movie, and little bits about the subtext about like toxic family relationships, just like subtextual stuff and things like that. But it's all there, and it's very well placed in the film, and it's a great slasher. I like it. I think it's exciting. I think some of it's scary. I remember the first time I saw it, it freaked me out. So, mission accomplished.
Honestly, it shares a lot of those themes from those older TV movies, like the toxic family relationships and the deep-rooted, like actual textured characters, people that you can grab onto, and then the next morning you go talk about it with everybody that you go to work and seeing in 1986, and it's like, wait a minute, why is so much of this missing from some of the things that is just surface level that we're putting out? And it's nice to see the attention go onto some of these underseen, I hate to use the classic term, but the underseen gems. Like there's so much that is still yet to be discovered for multiple generations.
Oh yeah, there's so many great little horror movies that I'm really excited about, like companies like Vinegar Syndrome and Scream Factory and Arrow and no, I'm forgetting Kino Lorber, maybe.
Kino.
Yeah. That are like pulling, they're just digging deep. And like, so for instance, Vinegar Syndrome released The Outing, which is this great museum set horror. It's one of my all-time favorite films. And they did a nice little extra where they got all of the actors and people involved in the film to talk about it. And there's very little information about the film itself, you know, outside of that. And that was really nice. And they did a beautiful job with the transfer of it, and it looks great. And it was just so neat to see somebody take the time with that film. Or again, Vinegar Syndrome, they did a great job with the TV movie that I did the commentary for called Moon of the Wolf. That's an incredible film. And they did this really great job because it's only been on like these really crappy transfers and streaming platforms. And now everybody can see what a really beautifully made film it is.
That's the biggest thing for me with some of these, because there's so many big names attached to these older TV movies that I don't think people realize that they had filmographies outside of the major films that get a lot of attention. And my go-to is Toby Hooper, and things like I'm Dangerous Tonight, people just didn't even knew existed outside of some of his other stuff. And to see his cinematography still shine on a great release from Kino, it's like a gift, and it's just incredible to see that they get attention on something like that. Or like you brought up Vinegar Syndrome, Fun City Editions was a partner label of theirs, and they put out that TV Primetime Panic box set, and they've got another one coming supposedly. They do. It's nice to see more of these.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that second set. Yeah, I did Freedom for the first set, and which is a Mayor Winningham movie, and oh my God, it's so amazing. I couldn't believe that's a movie I loved ever since I was a kid, and I couldn't believe that they asked me to do the commentary for that. And it was such a dream for me to sit there and like talk. There's just so much about that movie, but they actually have another extra. Excuse me, with the daughter of the woman that the movie's based on, and the granddaughter of the screenwriter of the film, and Jonathan Herzenberg actually got in touch with her because one of my best friends is friends with her. And he said, I know Carrie's daughter. And I was like, oh, do you think she'd be willing to talk to this guy about, and she was really excited to talk about her mom and her grandma.
Nice.
And so she ended up as an extra on the film too, which was really wonderful.
What a wonderful happenstance. That's fantastic.
Yeah. It made me so excited because I was like, nobody's going to get that kind of documentation anywhere else, you know what I mean? And not only that, I can't talk about a movie that I just did a commentary for, but I actually contacted the producer's daughter because he's long gone now. And they want to talk about their family. And she got really excited, and I was sending her all these questions, and I apologized. And she said, please don't ever apologize for asking about my father. And it made me feel kind of good because she was sending me all this stuff. She still sends me stuff. I believe the commentary is long gone now. And she's still like, oh, my dad did this. Do you want to see this promotional photo? And it's really great.
One of the things that I've heralded on this is the love that some of these smaller labels are giving to not just underseen gems, but literally completely unknown films. Things that got 10 copies printed on VHS in 1996, and they were, recycled amongst their friends, and that was it forever. Yeah. But the amount of love that doing a Blu-ray restoration of that in 2023 can give to a family, to a community, to a person that's still alive that created this and can see reviews popping up on Letterboxd, you can positively, literally change somebody's life out of the stratosphere that they ever would have imagined. And you're getting to see that for family members that have passed, because it's been 50 years for some of these. But it's amazing to see that some of these releases can have that sort of an incredible impact.
Yeah, it's really neat. I think I didn't go to it, but here in Austin, Joe Ziemba, who runs AGFA and who was a programmer at Alamo, he brought out the star of The Last Slumber Party and they showed it. And I think I wasn't there, but from what I was told, it was this was an amazing moment for her, to see that. And also he did that with Blood Lake as well. He brought out the guy who made Blood Lake, the director and the main star. And I feel like there's a third person. I did go to that. And I love Blood Lake, beyond, it's just the most amazing film. But it was really neat to see the filmmakers there and to have them watch it with an audience. And I think they were kind of in awe, because it's shot on video. And I'm sure they thought after they made it, nobody was ever going to bring up that movie ever again. And here it is on Blu-ray now, I think.
I think Blood Lake might have only gotten a DVD.
DVD, yeah. I realized when I said that because it's shot on video, so I don't know how that works.
Well, even then, a lot of shot on video stuff they're putting on Blu-ray because it can hold so much. So they're either doing double features or adding just every special feature known to man and then filling it up.
But it got a nice release, and it was cool to see it. I've seen it twice on the big screen now, believe it or not.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that movie. And sometimes I just watch it for fun. Like it showed up on Tubi, I think, at some point. And like there's millions of things on Tubi I haven't seen, and I'm like, let's watch Blood Lake. It's so good.
Oh, that's fantastic. One of the things with this that I was thinking beforehand is, obviously, you've probably seen way more made-for-TV movies than most people in their life. Do you ever look at somebody and say, what was the made-for-TV movie that had a big impact on you, and be able to glean like a lot of information about that person from that?
No, you know what? I don't. That's a good question. I mean, I have asked people what their favorite made-for-TV movie is. But do you mean, do I learn about them?
Kind of. And I was just thinking about it from a psychological point of view, because all of these, there's so many different types of made-for-TV movies, and the way that you've had this all-encompassing encyclopedic knowledge of them, you got to be able to hear what somebody loved and immediately go, oh, I bet, you had a really strong family structure and that's what you grabbed onto or something.
Oh, that's a really good question. No, I wish I was that profound when I was talking to people, but I do like to hear what people love. And there's tons of TV movies I haven't seen, and there are people who are always throwing out titles. It's always really scary when I do things like this, because you're going to ask me about some movie I've never seen, and I'm going to be like, and because there's thousands of them, and I've seen like 1,000. You know what I mean? If that, and so like, I think what I like so much about when I talk to people about TV movies and they want to tell me what they like is learning about films I might not know about, or maybe learning about different aspects of films. Like some people might like something that I don't like as much or thought I didn't like as much, and they'll tell me, oh, well, it had this in it and it's totally freaked me out, or this happened and I was so moved by it, or whatever. And then it helps me sort of understand the film and the impact of the film a little more, And so, but I don't know that it gives me information about the type of person they are. But it is interesting because I was talking to Will McKinley, who he's a big classic movie guy. He's all over the internet. And I think he used to write for Get TV and stuff. And we were talking about 8 is Enough. And I love that show. Matter of fact, I've been rewatching it. It's on Tubi. And I said to him, I'm really into big family shows like The Waltons and 8 is Enough, because even though I have brothers and sisters, they were half brothers and sisters and they were much older than me. So I grew up alone. Yeah. And I think that's why I'm attracted to big families. And then he started to think about why he liked big family shows too. And he was like, oh, that's interesting, and he started telling me about a little bit about his life. And he's like, maybe that's why I like these kinds of shows. And so there was a little bit of weird discovery there. It was unintentional, but so I guess it does happen.
It's super interesting, and I promise I won't give any obscure titles. There's one movie that I'm going to say that impacted me just because it has to come up. My big title that I look at for made-for-TV movies is Bad Ronald. Oh, sure. Everybody knows this one, but it's just so well made. I love that movie so much.
It's an amazing film, and I actually got to screen it here, and I screened it in Australia too. It actually played at a festival that I was invited to for my book launch, and it was like an early book launch. Lee Gambin was there, and John Harrison, nice. And Kayla Denise, and they showed Bad Ronald, and I should say I think they picked it, and then they were going to ask me to do an intro, but they asked me right beforehand. It was a really weird experience because I'd never done any kind of public speaking prior to that, right. And I was so happy to be on a panel with them because they were so warm and great, and it was easy to talk to them. But then afterwards, Kayla was like, do you want to introduce the movie? And I'd never done anything like that. But at the right. same time, it turned out people wanted to buy my book. And so I actually went out to the lobby and I signed my book for people, nice. Which was really weird. And it was amazing. And then I was doing some movies at the Alamo, like mystery movies. And one of them was Bad Ronald. And so I got to show it. And that's an interesting movie to watch with people who haven't seen it in 2023 because it's borderline. Like for me, I find Ronald to be kind of sympathetic, in the movie. In the book, he's not. But and younger people who never seen the movie were like, no, he's a full-on. There's something wrong with him. There's something really wrong with him, Amanda, and you should not have a crush on him. And I'm like, well, no, I feel bad. And so they're like, no, don't feel bad for him. And so it's just kind of funny that I think how the way people perceive him now is so different than I think we thought of him in the 70s.
And that's the crazy thing, though, is in the 70s, for a made-for-TV movie, there's a lot of nuance to this character. He can be sympathetic, but also kind of a piece of shit, and just really not have a lot of redeeming qualities, but also go, I mean, he's also a human. Why is his mom treating him like complete crap?
Yeah, I think the mother relationship really is where I get the sympathy from, because he's really been sort of trapped into this. Exactly. And she hates men because of her husband leaving. And I wonder why he left. And you know what I mean? She's not that nice. And so he has these ideas of what he wants to do. And she's like, no, you're going to do this. And then, but he's never lived anywhere outside of like this weird little bubble she kept him in. And so when he's on his own, he doesn't really know how to handle himself. So he gets lost in fantasy. And who doesn't do that when they're depressed? You know, I mean, exactly. He crosses some lines, but I think that the where he ultimately begins that part of his journey is pretty relatable, I think.
Well, we shouted out Bill Ackerman earlier, and you just mentioned him. I got to just give a moment to it. How awesome is Lee Gambin? The dude is such a wonderful, passionate person about film.
Yeah, I watched your interview with him.
Wonderful.
And boy, he's such a talker, and I'm envious of him because, like, one day we had a Zoom call, and because I hadn't seen him in a while, and he just like goes, and what I love about it is he like just says profound things without even realizing that they're profound. Like his understanding of film is so intense. And we were talking about something and he just said something and it was like, whoa, he just said one sentence and that encapsulates all of the emotion of where that film, you know, where it comes from in that film. And it was like amazing. And when I did that panel, what I remember most about it was I had never met Lee before, and he's a very larger than life kind of character online. And I was sort of scared because I'm very introverted, and I was like, I'm not sure what this is going to look like when I meet him, you know. And he was so warm. We went and had drinks, right? I got to Australia, and he's like, come and meet me, you know, at this bar. And instantly I felt like I'd known him forever.
Nice.
You know, and it was great. And so when we did that panel, it felt so good to be there with him because he is so warm and inviting and smart and gregarious, you know what I mean? And it was amazing.
Yeah, he definitely knows his stuff. That's hard to argue with.
Yeah.
Sorority House Massacre, obviously, you seem to be somebody that can truly geek out on that movie, like a few of us. What are some other titles that you've never gotten a chance to that you would love to get that moment of putting the Amanda Reyes stamp of geeking out on a title like that?
Well, so I've done a lot of dream projects. I will say Toolbox Murders was like my dream. Mm-hmm. It was high up there on my bucket list, and I was able to do a video essay for that as well. It's probably going to be my favorite project ever. And one of the most exciting aspects of that was that I was dealing with somebody at Blue Underground, and they showed it to William Lustig, and then they gave me his feedback, and I was so excited because he's my idol. And so I've done a lot of movies, but so Scream Factory actually released Killer Party a while back, and that has been one of my ultimate films. And I feel like I would just love to do a commentary for that. I don't know what I could add to it, but like, I just love that movie so much. Right. Prom Night would be a great movie. So we were talking about how this idea of catharsis and stuff. Prom Night is probably one of the greatest horror films that really tackles grief in a very realistic, kind of really amazing way. And I would love to talk about the certain aspects of that film and how it speaks to people. Over the years, that's a really interesting film because when I first saw it in 1980, it was just kind of some slasher, and it never really seemed to get a lot of attention. And now, slowly over the years, it's kind of rising up as one of the best from that era, and deservedly so. And that's really exciting. But that's had several releases and nothing's ever come of it. Like I've never been contacted. And I think I tried to get in on a release and maybe it had already gone too far and I couldn't get in on it. But for TV movies, I think my ultimate would be, there's a movie called This House Possessed with Parker Stevenson. And I've actually interviewed Parker Stevenson for my podcast. And He was really gracious. It was really nerve-wracking. He's my dream everything. And he was really nice. And I would love to do a commentary with him and Lisa Eilbacher, who's his co-star. She's also in Bad Ronald. And so we could talk about that. But to like moderate something with them would be really amazing, because he actually has a really good memory of making the film, considering he did it like 40 years ago. And also that he was probably only on set for like 2 weeks. You know what I mean? His memories of it are pretty strong. And he gave me a lot of information. There's a lot of TV movies I would like to do commentaries for. Some of them have already come out, like Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. I'd like to do something on. I don't know. I feel like there's such a long list. The Outing would have been one I would have liked to have done something on.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just a ton. It's a lot of times, though, I'll be honest, like sometimes I get approached for movies because it's a TV movie or something, and I like it. I won't ever take a movie I don't like, but sometimes when you're doing these movies, I guess a good example, it's not a TV movie, but a good example would be I did the commentary for Lipstick, which is, a Margot Hemingway kind of rape revenge-y movie, and I did that with Justin Kurzweil from The Hysteria Continues, and I had no idea when I accepted that film how moving it would be for me to work on that and to dig into Margot Hemingway's life, which was really tragic. She committed suicide in her 40s. And I actually, after I finished the commentary, we turned it in, and I actually went to LA and I went to the house that she died in. And I stood outside it with a friend of mine who turned out to be a huge fan of Margot. I didn't even know. And he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did that commentary." And so we went together, and it was funny because we went back to his house, and he'd never seen Killer Fish, which is this great movie that she's in that I love, with Lee Majors. And we were watching it, and he said, "For as long as I live, I'll never forget us standing outside that house together."
Wow.
And it was like this really, and I didn't expect when I signed on to do that commentary that it was going to have that kind of impact on me, And so it was such a pleasure for me to do that, and hopefully reappraise her career, because she got really raked over the coals when that movie came out, and undeservedly so. And it felt really good to sort of be like, no, she's actually really good in this. And this is actually a really good film, and it's really important. And this is why. And so that felt really good. So, so I have dream projects, but I think what it comes down to is I like to fall in love with my subjects. Yeah. And a lot of times I won't even know that I'm going to be in love with the film until I start diving into it, and then I fall in love with it completely as I go along.
Wow. Yeah, that's deep. And it really ties into kind of that idea of grief that you brought about, because when somebody is close to somebody as a person and they lose them, there's this, obviously massive hole in their life, but the work that accompanies that can have different types of effects on people. And mm-hmm. the way that some of these films are made, obviously, we both clearly love horror, and there's a lot of horror aspects in these films. But one thing that's always not sat right with me is that I can't imagine what some of these characters go through the minute the camera turns off in this fake made up reality, the grieving of, all of my friends and family are dead, or I'm alone in the forest now, but I'm safe because the killer is dead. Great. My life isn't better at the moment.
My life is awful. Dude, I always think at the end of the Funhouse, when you see Elizabeth Barrage leaving the Funhouse, and it's like, oh my God, why? It's just, why even bother? Or Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another good example, but it's just, everybody's gone, you know what I mean? And how do you survive past that? And that's interesting, because when I went back to school, my faculty advisor, she had a very conservative viewpoint of horror films, and she was always talking about that aspect of beyond the credits. And she's like, but they've lost everything. Yeah. I'm like, well, yeah, they have.
It's so horrifying.
But I mean, it's also it's kind of important though, because we're talking about that catharsis, and I think it's sometimes really important to not always tie things up with a little bow and make things happy, because life isn't happy. And I think even when things end devastatingly in a horror movie, even though it's fantasy and it could be ridiculous, like maybe the end of Friday the 13th, but there's something about that's kind of how life is. It just doesn't let go and wrap itself up. You know what I mean? And so in a way they're kind of special, because not a lot of films are allowed to do that.
Right. And I mean, earlier in this, we had discussed emotional vulnerability. And the way I've always attached to horror is that it is, it's an invitation for me to feel feelings. And for somebody that is, raised in a house by a very conservative man that sees me, who is growing up to be a 6'5" giant fat white dude, I'm not supposed to be sad. I'm not supposed to be afraid. I'm not supposed to be meek. I'm only supposed to be a strong, commanding, controlling voice. And I don't feel comfortable there. Not everybody feels comfortable with that type of a thing foisted upon them. And if I'm invited to languish in some of these feelings, damn it, I mean, I might just fall in love with that feeling.
That's good. Yeah. So I think you're bringing up a lot of really important points for film in general, but I think horror, because it's allowed to do things a little differently than like a drama or a comedy, or other genres, that we're letting people experience things, like I said earlier, that they're sort of been made to feel like they can't experience or express. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And that's why those films are so important. And I guess TV movies too, in a way, because, TV movies do have a lot of very pat endings, not all of them. But they do also work in melodrama. And I've made a lot of arguments about how melodrama is important and it's a lot like horror because it's about heightened emotions, and horror just does it differently. But melodrama, like I love soap operas. Soap operas so they're ridiculous, but they're all rooted in something really relatable. Like, for instance, I don't know how well you remember when Days of Our Lives had that Satan story.
I watched Days of Our Lives every day for years.
And so I don't know it that well, but I know that one of the characters blamed himself for leaving Marlena kind of open to the devil, and he did it. He did these things to her because he loved her, and they ended up being really toxic, bad things. But he like kind of admitted it, and I loved that, even though like she was like, I don't know, levitating, and her eyes were like pulled back and everything, but it all came from a place of like this guy who loved her but made it abusive, and that's something we can all relate to on some level. We've probably had some experience with an abusive relationship of some kind. And I was like, wow, that's what soaps do, and that's a really amazing thing that they're allowed to do, and if people are, I know everybody watches them differently. I know sometimes I go a little deep with them, but so melodrama is a really important thing. And there's a lot of melodrama in horror as well as other heightening of things with the violence and stuff. So it allows you to, definitely like traverse these different emotions and safely. And also, if you want to let them go at the end of the film, you can. If you want to, like you said, linger with them, which is amazing, you can do that too.
Obviously, they're extremes, but a lot of those melodramas, they're textbook examples of how to process emotions. And it's important because not a lot of people have that teaching at home, or even have a healthy emotional household to see genuine processing of emotions.
Yeah, there's a movie, and I just revisited it recently, called The Suicide's Wife, with Angie Dickinson. And it was directed by a man named John Newland, who did a lot of, like, he did One Step Beyond. I don't know if you know that anthology show. He directed it and starred in it. And he directed a lot of TV movies. He Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. But The Suicide's Wife is like probably the most accurate depiction of recovering from a loved one's suicide that I've ever seen. It's really raw. And TV movies, because they are domestic set and because the demographic is generally women aged 18 to 49, they're sort of allowed to be like more emotional, and they get like a more creative license with it. And it's an incredible film. And underneath it is the message that sometimes you're never going to know why somebody did something that awful. And that's just it, and it doesn't try to like make it nice, or, or sew it all up at the end. He was, because there's the character goes through all these different things. Like, she thinks her husband's gay, and he actually had this gay friend, and he's like, no, your husband loved you. He just could talk to me because we were peers. He had this book that he was trying to publish that wasn't going anywhere. She thought it was that. So all these different avenues she would go through, and she found out it wasn't really one thing. It was probably a lot of everything, and it's a hard lesson, but it gave people, like, I would think, who had gone through something like that, maybe some comfort, and it's kind of a really important film, and it's also a really lost film, which is really upsetting to me because I think it's one of John Newland's best, and And so anyway, TV, that's just an example of like dramas that were really amazing, that where you could like experience these things. And also it gives you a venue to look at these things that nobody's talking about. Nobody talks about suicide still. It's still stigmatized, right? And so it's a really great venue for that too.
And the hard part, I mean, a lot of these things, you know, the Saturday morning specials or the after school specials or there's like 15 different kinds of specials, whatever. But they all have these things that were there seemingly to talk about things in a way that people could realize I'm not alone. And that's the way that it created that. We're still having trouble communicating that with people nowadays. But the hard part is no matter what the story of these were about, most of us were affected by one of those things one way or another, which made them so special because it was just this human story at the base level. Yeah,
TV is really good at that. And it's interesting that you bring up the after school specials. And the other one I'm thinking of is the CBS School Break, which I kind of like more because it went crazy. They had some dark episodes. But one of the things that struck me about the ABC after school special when I started learning about it was that they had a set of rules for the shows. And one of them was that the adults could never come up with the solution. The kids could come to to their adult figures for guidance, but the kid ultimately had to make the decision. And that was because that show was targeted at kids, and it was so that they could learn to make choices for themselves and smart choices. And also that they could lean on certain figures, adult figures, but ultimately they could make the right decision if they needed to. And I was like, wow, that's really amazing. I didn't even realize that till I read about it. But that's clearly when I think back, and I watched not all of them, but a huge portion of them, that's exactly what they were doing.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. That's something, I mean, subconsciously that has to mean something, even if they don't point it out. That's really empowering. That's amazing to hear.
Yeah, it's really cool. And that kind of ties back to when I was talking about the demographic, excuse me, of women aged 18 to 49 for television. So many TV movies were targeted at women and telling women's stories. And they did it in the genre film too. And a movie, I think I talked with Erica about this on Unsung Horror, so I'm going to be repeating myself anyway, listen to that. But the one movie I like to use as like a genre film, I like to use as an example, is a movie with Valerie Harper called Night Terror, which also came out, I think, through Scorpion, and Dan Budnick and I did the commentary for that. But one of the things that I love so much about that movie is it's about a housewife who's being kind of made to feel like she's nothing more than a housewife. And then she witnesses a murder, and then it's a chase film. And as the film progresses, she grows as a person. And there's this line, and I can't remember, there's two versions of the film, and I can't remember if it's on the version that Scorpion released or not. But there's this line she has where she says, her husband at the end, he has no idea what she's been through, and he's talking to her, and he's like, God, I feel so bad making you go across the desert by yourself. You must have been so scared, just not realizing that she'd been chased by this murderer. Right. And he said, you know what, you're no Gloria Steinem. And she said, no, you're right, I'm not yet. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's totally amazing. She just grew as a person, and like, you know what I mean? And it was really empowering. And so TV movies for women were really doing like some really amazing things for women, specifically for women. And they're just amazing. And when you kind of start to root out the subtext, it's all there in like so many of those films.
Oh yeah, a lot of them were exceptionally progressive. There's things that, especially in mainstream film, they weren't willing to show or talk about for decades, and in many cases still. But the fact that you could find them because the audience they were essentially trying to sell things to through advertising through these, they were somebody that was going to be more interested in that progressive feeling. So it's an amazing gift that we've had.
Yeah, it's the only place that's really catered to women in any way that I can see. In film. And so, yeah, it's really important. And just like, I have all these movies in my head now. I just feel like, like all kinds of things. I do this on my Twitter and also on my Facebook, my public Facebook. I've been trying to do this thing and I've been able to do it every week, where I pick like an underrated TV movie that I think deserves a little attention. And one I talked about was a movie called Anatomy of a Seduction, which is basically about an older woman having an affair with a young guy. He's like 20 and she's 40. But it's more than that. It's about a woman in 1979 or 1980 when they made it, who is a single mother, and she wants to and a businesswoman, and she wants to start living outside of these boundaries that we had for women back then. She's more than just a mother or an ex-wife. You know what I mean? She's an architect and she's a beautiful woman and she's vibrant and she's relevant. You know what I mean? And that's what those films are saying. And so, but the critics never gave them that credit. They were always like, yeah, oh gosh, this is so cliche. And why is this? Nobody wants to watch this. This is trash. But I'm like, no, I think women were watching these and they fully understood what they were saying to them. They're not saying, oh, go out and have an affair with a 20-year-old, but they're saying like, you don't have to live by these certain labels. You can be the person that you need to be, you know, that suits you, and you don't have to be ashamed of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And especially older women, because like it's getting better. But like you turn 40 in 1979 and you're single and you're a woman, forget it. Bye. You serve no purpose to us anymore, right? And so, and this movie was saying, and movies like this, there's several of them, that's not really the only option for you.
Wow. Yeah, man. This has been incredibly profound tonight. I'm loving this.
Thank you.
I mean, obviously there's some obvious questions that I got to throw out there, especially because tastes evolve and all that. So the first one, people that maybe this is their first foray into made-for-TV movies, which handful of ones are you throwing out there nowadays for people just to really grab a hold of?
The movie, if you're really into genre movies, the movie that I always recommend people see, and it's really easy to get a hold of, is Dark Night of the Scarecrow. It's one of the greatest TV movies ever made. Yeah, it's incredible. And it's incredible. And it's a really great gateway into horror, because I think people think, so Bad Ronald's a really great movie, but I also like, it's a really small film. Yep. And I think TV movies get really criticized for like, because they're shot very quickly, and like something like Bad Ronald, it's all interior, like there's very little shot outside the house. It's very simple, and that's fine, and I love it. But a lot of people who aren't used to that kind of stuff, I think sometimes it turns them off. They want something more cinematic. It's
like a second level that you would go into.
Yeah, and so Dark Night of the Scarecrow was meant to be a theatrical that they had to sort of refix a little to make it for TV, but it's got a lot of interesting elements to it, and it has a lot of really interesting subtext. But I don't know anybody who's seen it who hasn't fallen in love with it. And I think that's a good way to get people curious about TV, and then start introducing them to like the really cool, fun ones, like Don't Be Afraid of the Dark and Bad Ronald, and like the classic Night Stalker is a great one. And that one also has like a more kind of a cinematic flair to it. Anything Dan Curtis did, I think you're going to find fans, because he was really good at what he did. And then there's just some really neat little ones, like The House That Wouldn't Die, which is like a 1970 movie with Barbara Stanwyck. That's really good. And also the book that it's based on is like one of my all-time favorite novels. And I'm trying to think of some of the other little ones. Oh my gosh, of course, now I'm drawing a blank. There's so many. Like the 70s was just filthy with horror movies. Five Desperate Women is a lot of fun if you want something a little more campy. There's a really great thriller that came out in 1981 called No Place to Hide with Kathleen Beller, that was directed by John Llewellyn Moxey, who did The House That Wouldn't Die and The Night Stalker. He's one of the best TV movie filmmakers. And that's a really great movie that's not a slasher, but came out in the era of slasher. So it's got actually a guy that wears a mask like in Prom Night, and it actually has a chase through high school like Wendy's Chase in Prom Night, and it's kind of mimicking those films. And it also has a final girl transformation in it that's really amazing, and it's just a really solid thriller. That's one of my favorites. I'm trying to think what else. There's a movie from 1991 called The Haunted that really blows people away, with Sally Kirkland, that's based on a true story about this family who move into a house that has like a ghost living inside it. And it's actually the introduction of the Warrens, that are really famous in the Conjuring films. They were first represented in The Haunting, or The Haunted, I'm sorry. And it's got some talk about like things that shouldn't be on TV, but somehow got on TV. Yeah. Have you seen The Haunted?
The name sounds very familiar. I hesitate to say yes because it's been a long time either way. But
if you haven't seen it, and I don't want to be too spoilery, but there's demon sex in it, and it's wild. I showed it in my lectures because it's just a show where like the
Where's
TV
my
movie.
list?
Yeah. mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And I love to show it to people because they're like, oh my God, what am I looking at? And like Trilogy of Terror is that's another good one.
I love Trilogy of Terror.
Yeah, Trilogy of Terror is like, my parents let me watch that. Well, they were actually watching it, and I came home for lunch on like a Saturday afternoon. It was on the afternoon movie, and there's just this like doll chasing this woman across her apartment. And my parents thought it was fine for me to see it because it was on TV and it was made for TV, and it's in Saturday afternoon now in a rerun. And I was traumatized for years from that film. Like, you know what I mean? And I think The Haunted did that for a lot of people who grew up in the 90s.
Yeah, I love Trilogy of Terror.
It's great. It's a lot of fun. I have the Zuni fetish doll actually in my office.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's cool.
So to flip that to the obvious follow up after that is, so what are you thinking are like your top 5 favorite made for TVs at the moment?
That's a good question. Well, This House Possessed will always be my favorite. Why are you asking me this question? Why am I drawing a blank on all the TV movies that I love?
I'm sure a lot of them will be some of the same titles that we've heard all day.
Yeah, I feel like there's some repeat because Dark Knight of the Scarecrow is on there, and No Place to Hide is definitely one of my favorites. Ronald's, I think, in my top 10 at least. I'm trying to think, like, I do obscure movies all the time. I'm trying to like promote. Oh, I saw it's not a horror movie, but a movie that I saw and actually did a little tweet thread and a Facebook post and an Instagram thing on is a movie called Hustling that came out in 1975, which was based on a woman's book. Her name is Gail Sheehy, and she wrote about the epidemic of prostitution in New York. And they made a movie based on that. And it's this really fantastic movie by Joseph Sargent, who did that movie Freedom we talked about from the Fun City Primetime Panic box set. And it's really gritty. And Lee Remick plays the Gail Sheehy, the author's character, and Jill Clayburgh plays the prostitute that she befriends, and she takes her into like the world of prostitutes. And it's shot in a very matter-of-fact style. It really captures New York at the time. And it's got a lot of great actors, like Alex Rocco, I think, is in it. Jeffrey Kramer from Jaws has a very small part. It's got the guy who played the principal on Welcome Back, Kotter is like a bad guy in it, which blew my mind. Mr. Woodman. And Melanie Mayron's in it, and Monty Markham, and it's this amazing film. And I think probably at the time it really was like, it's got like a threesome in the movie, like things you wouldn't normally see on TV. It's got these 2 prostitutes embarking on a threesome with this guy who's hired them, but they're only on the threesome because the one girl's feeling kind of lonely and she wants to talk. And so they're just talking back and forth while they're taking off their clothes, and the guy's just sitting there. And he's like, "What are you doing? I paid for this." And they're like, "Lord, we have this stuff to talk about." So it's like, it's this really interesting movie about like their lives that I really liked. There's a movie that I've been wanting to revisit that I haven't seen in a while, called The Hostage Heart, which is about some terrorists who actually hold up a hospital, particularly a surgeon performing open heart surgery, unless they do this certain thing. Like the ransom will be like doing this, or they'll make the guy mess up the surgery. I'm not even explaining it right, but it's called The Hostage Heart. It's got this amazing cast, and I've been wanting.
That's a great title.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I've been wanting to revisit it so I could write about it for this thing I'm doing for this retrospective. There's a movie I love, another drama called Griffin and Phoenix with Peter Falk and again Jill Clayburgh, about 2 people dying of cancer who meet each other and they don't realize the other one is dying. And it's a romance, and it's by the people who did Soap, if you ever watched Soap. Oh, yeah. So it's got a lot of comedy, and it's also got a lot of really tragic stuff in it. And Peter Falk's amazing. Yeah, there's so many of them, and they're all really good. There's one that I saw recently called Drive Hard, Drive Fast with Joan Collins, which it is a lost film. I'm really happy to get a copy of it, but it's about a race car driver who picks up this woman to take her somewhere, and they're being chased by like an axe wielding maniac. He's not axe wielding, it's like a machete. And
I did not expect that part.
Yeah, and there's this amazing scene where he breaks into their hotel room, and there's like this fight scene, and I was not expecting it, and it's this thriller, and it's really fun, and it's a really interesting movie because it was shelved. I guess the network didn't like it, but then there was a writer's strike in 1973, so they pulled it out to fill a gap in their programming, and it's the only reason why it ever aired.
Interesting.
And it's really good.
Well, and I guess you brought up Lost Film again. The question that us that love physical media have to ask: do you happen to know why so many of these are lost? Is it because of elements? Is it because of rights? Is it because people recorded over stuff like they did in the UK for so long?
It's a little bit of all of that, and I don't have a specific answer. I get that question a lot, and I wish I knew. But so, for instance, I just interviewed Monty Markham, who I mentioned was in Hustling, and he did a movie called The Astronaut that he really likes, and he would like to see it come out on DVD. And I can't remember who owns it, Universal, and he contacted Universal on his own accord, and he was like, I'm just curious, do you guys still have that movie? And they're like, yeah, it's probably somewhere in the vaults. They don't think that there's any interest in it. So there's tons of movies that are just sitting in vaults. But also, when TV movies were made in their golden era in the 70s, a lot of movies were co-produced between the network and a studio like Universal. And so I think when they were making them in the 70s, they didn't understand what home video meant. Yeah. So there's not really like a contract for them. And I think there's a rights issue there too. Like who has the rights and how do we release it? And how does that work with licensing? I think that's part of it. There are things that have been taped over. I don't know if you're familiar with the ABC Wide World Mystery, but it was a late night program. And a lot of them have been popping up, luckily, thanks to UCLA Film and Television Archive and the Library of Congress. And some that have just shown up, but on 16 millimeter and stuff. But most of them have been lost, and I think some of them were wiped, and they're just considered gone. And that really breaks my heart because some of those. Speaking of movies to recommend, there's a Wide World Mystery that I kind of like to show people called Alien Lover, because it's so weird, and it's from the early 70s, and it stars Kate Mulgrew as this teenager whose parents had died, like in a car accident or something. She goes to live with like her uncle or somebody, and she's not really fitting in. And her cousin is like into electronics. So he made this television that he keeps in the attic, and she goes up to like just do something in the attic, and this alien appears on the TV, and she falls in love with him, and they have like a love affair, and it's wild. And it's got this really weird ending. And and for some reason it's re-aired like on cable, so there's like a really beautiful upload of it on YouTube. Oh. If anybody the first time I saw it was an awful upload, but somebody has, I think, since re-uploaded it with something better. And it's wild. It's shot on video. It's one of those just takes place in like a very small setting. It's 73 minutes long. It's really talky, and it's unlike anything you'll ever see. It's amazing. It's amazing.
That sounds incredible. I might have to find that for myself.
Pretty good. It's pretty good.
Anything exciting coming up for you other than these recent projects that we've talked about?
There are things happening, but nothing's been announced, so I can't really say what they are, which I hate. I love like announcing things because they just, once you do something, you want to tell people. Yeah. And I like to vague tweet, and sometimes that gets you in hot water, because people will start asking you questions, and I'm not going to answer them, and then I'm in a corner. But I've worked on a couple things over the last year that I'm still waiting on, that I'm really excited about. Some TV and some horror stuff. And some kind of unique things. And I don't know what else to say. I'm just waiting for stuff. So,
well, here, let's end on this instead. What are some of the contributions to some of these discs that you're most proud of that you don't get to talk about enough?
Well, I guess probably the Toolbox Murders, like I said, would be the big one. That was a really big deal for me. It meant a lot because I talk about how the film is really about grief and loss, and that meant a lot to me. Justin Kurzweil and I did a commentary for Girls Night Out that was, once we were able to like start digging into that film, we couldn't stop. We cannot stop the research because all these veins started opening up. So for instance, one of the things we talked about was that the film was actually directed by an Oscar winner. But it's not known that he's an Oscar winner because he won an Oscar for like a short film he made with the company, and the company got the Oscar, but he was the director of the short. And I was like, oh my God, Girls Night Out was made by an Oscar winner. who knew that? Who knew that? You know what I mean? And also we found AKAs that weren't known yet because, like, for instance, sorry, my refrigerator's making noise. One of the guys whose name is he's only got one scene. He's in the party scene. And I looked him up to do his biography, and his local paper wrote about him being cast in this horror movie. And it had a totally weird title that we couldn't back into. We'd never seen it anywhere else, but it was the same film. And so, like, we just started finding all these things. We found that a lot of the actors were in plays together in New York and things like that. And we were, like, constantly going back and forth with each other, like texting, and like, Justin, did you know this? And he's like, no, I didn't. Did you know this? No, I didn't. And so that ended up being a really rewarding film for us because we found so much information about it. And I think people enjoyed it. Like, I try really hard not to look up too much stuff because I can't deal with it if it's not positive. Right. You know what I mean? But I think people liked it from what I've heard. So hopefully they got something out of it. Those are the two. And Lipstick was another big one that obviously had a lot of impact on me. And I hope that people enjoyed that. I guess ultimately it's less about, like, me saying, oh, this was special, and more about that maybe people just enjoy it because now I'm talking on, and I hope people aren't like, oh my God, why is she going on about this? You know what I mean? And so ultimately I just want people to enjoy what I've done. Oh, I will say I really enjoyed doing the night galleries.
Ooh, yes.
That was a big deal for me because I love that show. And I got to do a couple of really meaningful episodes. The Dark Boy, again, talking about loss and grief. That's a really amazing entry into the series. I got to do The House, which you want to pet it, which is one of my favorite entries. I did this really fun one that Rod Serling wrote called Midnight Never Ends. And that was one of those where I deep dived into it. And I was able to pull out all these Twilight Zone Easter eggs from it that I thought were amazing. And so that was really fun. And also, by the time we got to the third season, they're only 25 minutes long. And that was kind of nice. Because commentaries are hard because you have to go for a long time. And so when you have a 25-minute episode, you have to cram a lot of information in your 25 minutes, but it is also, like, kind of fun, you know, and it also feels really good to, like, get it out and then be like, oh, 25 minutes. And you got all the information you need and we're done. We can move on. And those were really fun. And I think the third season gets kind of shit on, but there were some really fun episodes. And I did a couple of them that I really liked.
It's hard to overstate how legendary those releases are. Those 3 seasons, Kino put a lot of love and energy and money and time into getting those just to be as perfect as they possibly could. And
so well deserved, because that show really got butchered in syndication. Yep. And it just developed a really awful reputation. And also it's well known that Rod Serling was not happy with a lot of it. And I know he's everybody's idol. And so we followed the Serling and we sort of left behind the other people who were trying really hard to make a really good show, despite all of that headbutting he did with the producer, with Jack Laird. And it was great to see, like, the respect come to that show that I think it's deserved the whole time. And that was kind of like my introduction to anthology. Well, I guess One Step Beyond was my introduction. But after that, I think Night Gallery was, like, really got me into anthologies. And I remember years ago now, when VHS was still kind of a thing, there was this yard sale like 2 blocks from my house. And do you remember Columbia, when you could get cassettes through Columbia?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. And you remember they did movies. They did, like, all the Daniel Steele movies, and they got Daniel Steele to come and do, like, the little intro. Well, they did the night galleries, right? And they came out in these red VHS boxes, which I don't think I have anymore. And I bought this guy's entire collection, which was, I think, most of the night galleries. And I didn't know how to get them back to my house because I walked there. And so he pulled out all these garbage bags. And then I went home and I got my roommate, who was, I think, furious because I already had so much VHS in our apartment. It was not a big apartment. And he came with me, and I brought back, like, 4 garbage bags full of Night Gallery VHSs. And then I just sat down and I started watching them. And he was like, and he watched them with me. He was fine with watching them. I think just the space they were taking up. Right. But, like, I was so excited about it. I was so excited. And so there's a lot of stuff about that show that was like, it was just really nice to see all that love and care, because I feel like it's been like the bastard stepchild of the Twilight Zone for so long, and now it's kind of its own thing, and people are looking at it that way, and that means a lot to me.
Well, I think most physical media collectors can probably find something to relate to in that story. If I was not so embarrassed, I would happily pan over and share what this room looks like right now, because it feels that exact same thing. But just to kind of end it, like the companies like Kino, Warner Archive, which didn't get a mention earlier, Vinegar Syndrome doing some stuff, Fun City, Arrow getting some of these smaller titles out there. It's amazing that we are getting some of these that have been forgotten, have been sitting on a shelf for decades, have never had any release. And I hope that they keep coming out, and I hope that they keep turning to you, because you are one of the more valued voices in the community doing it. And I have a Patreon, and I have a Discord that's a part of that. And one of the things that I do is I ask people for questions, and I had multiple people that helped contribute to these tonight, because they seem to really enjoy you and really look forward to getting stuff from you. I know when Sorority House Massacre got announced last week, and I did my weekly live show, there were multiple people in the comments that said, I'm buying this simply because Amanda's on it.
Oh, that's so nice. That I'm so self-conscious about it, because I like even doing this, like being on camera, but I was so excited that they asked me, or Daniel asked me, and I'm still beside myself over it. Like, it's so funny when you talk about dream projects. Like, I'm sure a lot of people be like, "Oh, Taxi Driver," and I'm like, "Sorority House Massacre." Right. But like I love talking about little movies, and I'm really upset that I didn't mention Warner Archive, because I did Don't Be Afraid of the Dark for them, and the Bermuda Depths with Lance Vaughn from Kindred Trauma, and they kind of started the love of the TV movies. Yeah. Like they really they're like, let's try to release some of these and see. And they had a streaming service that had a bunch of them, a lot of really good films. And I think they really piqued people's interest in that. And they deserve so much acknowledgement for that. So thank you that was an oversight on my part. And I'm almost embarrassed to say, why did I do that? But they're so important.
That's the exciting thing, though. I did a series on my channel where I said boutique labels I collect, and so should you. And I think I did 9 or 10 entries, and each one had like 10 or 11 companies. There's so many out there. Nobody can be bothered with memorizing all of them. It's crazy how many are out there contributing. Just wonderful releases to what we're ingesting, and there's so much out there.
Yeah, that's the exciting part, and also the hard part, because I don't make enough money to buy everything.
Right.
And so I try to wait. A lot of times I wait till I go to Texas Frightmare, and then I just go crazy and I buy, because they have deals and stuff. Or Kino Lorber has really great sales. But so much stuff comes out and I can't buy it right when it comes out, and it kills me.
Same.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Amanda, thank you so much for this. Like I said earlier, this has been profound and special and super meaningful, and so many different things that I feel like I'm easily going to go back and watch this myself, which I don't do that often, just because I just loved some of your insight.
Oh, thank you so much. I was really joy to be here. I appreciate this.
Hopefully we can do it again someday after we get some other things announced under your belt.
Yay. So hopefully something will get announced. Just the waiting is so, I want to tell everybody.
Well, thank you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching The Disconnected. On the way out, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you've liked the video, and that you've copied the link to be able to share with someone else that may appreciate this.